this morning if any one of you have ever struggled, and if so, to raise your hand. I believe that I would find most of you, if not all of you, would have your hands raised. The Bible tells us in John chapter 16, I have told you these things so that in me you may have perfect peace. In the world you may have tribulation and distress and suffering, but be courageous. I have overcome the world. This woman had been struggling for years with her health, yet because of her faith she was able to persevere. Romans chapter 5 reads, not only so, but we also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and hope. Sometimes suffering may look like the loss of a loved one. Someone may have passed on and went to heaven, and other times it may be someone similar to the prodigal son, someone who has separated themselves from your life. Neither of these situations are easy, nor grieved for quickly. Sometimes suffering in these experiences may come and go for a lifetime. Suffering could also look like a financial burden due to a heavy amount of debt, or a loss of a job, or unexpected medical bills. Suffering could also be experienced by an illness that alters our health and quality of life, just like the woman in the crowd. Suffering could look like depression or anxiety, either because of a genetic inheritance or a past traumatic experience. Suffering, as we can see, can have many different faces, and sometimes in our suffering, we may begin by relying on our own abilities to heal. But as we continue to rely on ourselves, we begin to realize that we continue to suffer, if not the same, but worse. And we find it even more difficult to escape the depths of our valley. We do not know if the woman in the crowd had been praying about her illness for a long time, or if she was even a believer of Jesus. She very well could have been trying to deal with her illness on her own for all this time. What we do know is on this day, she knew who Jesus was and believed in his healing power. And in her desperation, she reached out to touch the hem of his cloak and was healed by his touch. The story of this woman's faith is an example to us to understand the power of the touch of Jesus and the power of faith. That in our suffering, if we would just fall at the feet of Jesus in our desperation and reach out to touch him and have faith for him to heal our suffering, then we too may be healed. However, we must understand that our prayers will be answered in God's timing, not in our own timing, or what we may expect. Just as the gospel begins with Jairus begging for Jesus to heal his daughter, Jesus begins to make his way. But in the meantime, stops because of the woman who touched his cloak, to recognize the act of her desperation and to tell her that by her faith she has been healed and to go in peace. Jesus did not reach Jairus' daughter until she was dead, or at least that is what the people with whom were with her thought. They even told her father to not bother Jesus because she had already passed. However, Jesus did not leave. Instead, he instructed them to believe, in other words, to have faith. And once again, by her father's faith and by Jesus' touch, the young girl is healed as he grasps her hand and commands her to arise. As I think about the woman and Jairus' daughter, I think about some of us who may have been struggling for some time, trying to hide behind our struggles, and only finding ourselves struggling even more and falling even deeper into our valley. Why not, in place of trying to manage our struggles on our own, instead we lay them at Jesus' feet and pray to him in our desperation? I also think of Jairus and the fact that he went to Jesus for his daughter's sake. Maybe this part of the story can be translated as a way for us to recognize that we too can be a servant of others who may be spiritually ill or spiritually dead. That even if they are too weak and cannot reach out to Jesus, that we can request by prayer for Jesus to come into their lives and heal them by his touch, and pray that they too would feel his grasp and would hear the call of Jesus and rise up. The Bible tells us in James chapter 4, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." And in Matthew chapter 11, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And in Hebrews chapter 13, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Just as Jesus stopped amidst the crowd for the woman whom had touched his cloak to give her confirmation that in her desperation and by her faith she was healed by his touch, and just as Jesus listened to hear Jairus' plea in his time of desperation and by his faith and by Jesus' touch, his daughter was healed and brought back to life. If you come to Jesus in your time of struggle and desperation, and by your faith and by the power of Jesus' touch, you may be healed as well. Healing, though, can look different than what we would expect. Most of us would hope for a cure for those who are terminally ill, or for our situations to be completely fixed, or for the prodigal son or daughter in our life to return. However, sometimes in situations, things don't resolve in the way we would hope, but instead, we find a blessing in a different way. For the ones who may be ill, maybe they are gifted with medicine that can prolong their life, but not completely heal their disease. Or in instances, maybe they do pass on and go to heaven, and we find peace in knowing that they are in heaven and no longer suffering, and they too are also reunited with loved ones who have gone before them. Even though we may have something in our life that brings us suffering, we must understand that through this, God is working something for our good. Whether it is the character or the hope that is produced during this time, or the closeness that we developed while we draw near to God. No matter what form our healing comes in, whether it be on this side of heaven or not, we must find comfort and peace in knowing that whatever the end result, God hears our prayers, and he will be with us every step of the way. That all we need to do is submit our prayers to him and stretch out our arms to him in faith. Amen.